Well, as you know, we're going to continue doing something we've been doing the last few weeks. But I want to just put this verse up on the board to start with. It says this in Proverbs 19, verse 2. It is not good to have zeal without knowledge, nor be hasty and miss the way. We're working our way through the series on Practising the Way by John Mark Comer. And it's about us being apprentices to Jesus, about following his way. And today I'm looking at helping us to not miss the way by eliminating hurry. Eliminating hurry. My son James and I, we're quite keen walkers. He's more fit than I am. But we're walking the South Downs Way in 2022. We just started the second half. We hadn't done the first half, but we were starting the second half. And then up behind us, I heard this voice. Beware, coming through, beware, coming through. We turned, and there were two men that were coming through a narrow section of the way. And we let them pass, and off they went into the distance at breakneck speed. Okay, I'll use that phrase later on again. About 4 miles down the road, we saw them once more. Sat down, shoes off, socks off, with the worst blisters I have ever seen in my life. And they told us that it had been their aim to complete the 100-mile section of the South Downs Way in 2.5 days. You can work that. You can do the maths. To do this, they'd already walked a lot in the dark. They'd had little sleep, and now they had done damage, serious damage, to the most important part of a walker's anatomy, and that is their feet. We carried on. We completed the 15-mile section that we were doing that day. You won't be impressed by that 15-mile section. It nearly killed me. But we never saw them again. They didn't pass us, and we assume that they actually had given up. In their hurry, they didn't see what we saw, the view, the beauty, the delightful things that you come across when you're walking, the relationships as you talk. To sum up, they had lost, they had missed the intimacy of the South Downs Way. They had failed to complete it. So my task today is to encourage you not to allow hurry to dominate your life and spoil that intimacy that we can have with Jesus and also with other people. Remember, our series has highlighted being with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, and doing as Jesus does. And that cannot happen unless we have intimacy, and we have time, and we have intentionality. Now, a few things you should know. Firstly, John Mark Comer, who wrote that book, has written another book called The Ruthless, Elimination of Hurry. I've not read that book. Secondly, I'm retired from paid employment and can more easily choose to do with my time what I like. Okay. Thirdly, I'm over 70, and quite frankly, what do I know about today's subject and living in the modern world? I'm practically dead, some of you might think. Although, to be fair, I'm not yet old enough to be the President of the United States of America. But hopefully, what I can do is point you to Jesus, and we'll come back to that later. The verse that we're going to look at, or be the part of everything that we're doing today, is this. Matthew chapter 11, very well-known verses to most of you. Matthew 11, 28 to 30 says this. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble," or gentle and holy, humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. So let's do the Christian preacher thing, 3 alliterative phrases, okay? The evolution of hurry, the effect of hurry, and the elimination of hurry. I could have been even more clever on that, but you want to know, come and tell me afterwards. So come and talk to me afterwards. So we're going to look at the evolution of hurry. Once upon a time, and there was a time like this, people would wake up sunrise, they'd go about their everyday business, they'd be occupied with their jobs. They're both inside and outside the home, and they'd eat, they'd drink, they'd have relationships. The sun went down and they went to bed. That was their life. And then something else happened. They say that 3 inventions changed everything. You might have your own thoughts on that, but these 3 are as follows. It makes the world a hurried place today, very prevalent in our world today. The first was the clock. The second was the electric light bulb. And the third was the iPhone. Okay. Those 3 things have changed significantly the way they operate in our way of life today. Slow down, you move too fast. You've got to make the morning last. Kicking around the cobblestones, looking for fun and feeling groovy. Simon and Garfunkel. Does anyone know when that was written? Julianne, you weren't born then. Come on. 1966. Okay. 1966. Slow down. You move too fast. Actually, that was a great year, 66. We won the World Cup and everything else as well. Now, Dallas Willard, who actually was the chap that came up with the ruthless elimination of hurry, when did he come up with that phrase? 1994. That was some time ago. About 15 years ago, I was with a colleague and we were being driven by somebody else to one of the stores that I was responsible for at the most ridiculous speed down the M20. His phone was pinging constantly, and of course it wasn't even a smartphone at that days, it was pinging constantly. He talked incessantly about the pressure is on that he had all these emails all the time, he didn't know how to answer it, and he kept talking non-stop. And I'd tell us the pressure was just too much. It reached a point as we were driving down that my fellow passenger said this to him. He said, I would rather us arrive at our destination 20 minutes late than arrive at a different destination 20 years early, meaning he was in fear of his life if he hadn't quite got it. The sense of hurry has been around for a long time. It's not a modern phenomenon, but it is getting worse. That is certain. There was a time when they thought all this modern stuff would help us to have lots of leisure time. What we choose to do with our leisure time, and that's often not leisure. Just over 2 weeks ago, I went to see Dear Evan Hansen at the Marlow, and this is a musical, which doesn't sound great when I explain it all to you. I'm not going to explain it all to you, but it doesn't sound great, but it was a wonderful evening, and it's about the challenges that some people have in high school. And the things that I should get Grace to come up and tell me all about it, but she said, no, I'm not going to do that. So it's the impact of smartphones on the generation and social media and loneliness and all those sorts of things. I couldn't help noticing, though, the impact of the smartphones that were in the audience, a relatively younger audience on that particular night. They were absolutely wrapped in their phones. They were flicking, they were doing this, they were doing that, they were pressing on this, and it was going, and it was a few seconds, and it would go, and it would go. It was on, and on, and on, and I was only watching. I wasn't part of that experience, but it was endless, and I found it exhausting. Then the music went on. First half came to the end. I went and sensibly got an ice cream, came back, talked to Catherine about how marvelous it had been that first half. But then I noticed everybody got their phones out again. They were going through this. It was endless. It was non-stop all the time. Where are we going? It seemed like a mind-numbing, endless pursuit of, I'm not sure what exactly. Perhaps some of you need to tell me what that is. Now, as a retired pharmacist, I'm aware of all the things that TikTok and Instagram like to do, and they set up little hints or hits of pleasure. I know a drug called dopamine is released in the brain to enable that to happen. It's not a bad drug. It's fine. It's good. We all need those little pleasure hits, don't we? But the truth is that the system is set up to reward you even more and even more for each hit. And you have targets you have to reach. And to reach those targets, you have to go faster and faster to get those hits. And the thing about dopamine and the impact of dopamine on your body is it's great, but the impact gets less and less. And so you have to do more and more hits to get the same pleasure reaction in your body. It wears off. Now, that isn't that new. In my day, as a youngster, there was another drug that used to do exactly the same thing, this illusion of enjoyment and constant activity. It was called dexamphetamine. Its other name was speed. The device which was meant to give us so much more leisure time has in fact trapped us in a snare that is not great. And in a work and relationship context, it's no better. We are driven by incessant demand of WhatsApp and emails that we have to answer immediately. If it's a minute, 10 minutes, they haven't contacted me back for 10 minutes. Where are they doing? Are they forgetting who I am? You can get struck off. Or in a work context, you can be seen as not committed to the organization 24/7. You're not there with us because you're not doing everything you possibly can to help. To meet those deadlines creates more and more pressure in people's lives. On social media, we're bombarded with other people's lives. And the pressure to conform or be like or buy like is enormous. It's also a place where we judge other people's outsides by how we're feeling inside. And we think we are different and not good enough. The net result, it seems, is a lack of time to complete all that we want to or what we believe is expected of us. And the two are often different. So what is the effect of hurry? Well, Practising the Way course was produced in America, and we need to understand that, where things are even worse than they might be in this country. Holidays are limited. Days off merge into work. You are always available is the mantra that you hear. And John Mark Comer says that it was as bad for him as a pastor of a megachurch as it was for working for a corporate giant. But even in this country, the impact of deadlines, total availability to others, endless grind that can start before the day has started, leaves us weary and damages our well-being. Therefore, we need to do something about it. However, before I go any further, I want to speak up for work. It almost thinks, well, we don't need to do any of this. Let's just opt out. But Colossians chapter 3:24 says this: whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Now, some of you will know that I had this on the wall of my office when I first started with Boots, and it remained there for many years. It's something that I passionately believe in and actually operated my life for. We were made for work. There's no doubt about that. It is a God principle to work. In fact, Paul, in the letter to the Thessalonians, says something more powerful than this. It's come up. If a man does not work, you shall not eat. We hear that some among you are idle. They are not busy. They are busybodies. Such people we command and urge in the Lord to settle down and earn the bread they eat. That's quite strong, isn't it? But there's such a truth in it. Now, I appreciate some of you might not be in a position to be able to do some of that stuff, and we understand that, but you get the principle that Paul is encouraging there. So it's okay to be busy. We should be busy. But where our busyness becomes a burden and a barrier, we've got a problem. It's over busyness that creates hurry. Hurry then creates anxiety and sleeplessness, and all the other signs of acute stress. Dallas Willard, who I mentioned a bit earlier with the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, says this: hurry is a state of frantic effort one falls into in response to inadequacy, fear, and guilt. It is not a state of effort. Effort can be wonderful. We're made for effort. But a state of frantic effort that we fall into involving inadequacy, fear, and guilt. Just think of that for a moment. Now, Lewis Carroll created the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, and that's 1865 he said this. And it says this famous line: I'm late for a very important date. No time to say hello, goodbye. I'm late, I'm late, I'm late. Off he goes. Brilliant picture of what hurry is all about. It could have been written for today, and yet it was 1865. There's a wonderful Christian, he was a pastor, he was an international speaker now, and he wrote this in Christianity Magazine last year. Jeff Lucas, he says this: I tend to live my life at high speed. I'm usually first to finish a meal, even though it's unlikely that someone is going to steal my chicken. I love that phrase. That's great, isn't it? I speed read and sometimes open my mouth without pausing to activate my brain. I find it quite difficult to be fully present. When out for a delightful walk in the country, I up my pace as I ponder what I need to do when I get home. Does that resonate with any of you at all? And many of you will be aware of the massive increase in anxiety and sleeplessness and depression in the Gen Zs. Now, if you don't know what a Gen Z is, you'll be around the age of 13 to 28. That's group. If you fit into that group, you will know something about what I'm talking about because you have lived and grown up with the smartphone. There's a guy called Jonathan Haidt, a psychologist, American psychologist, and he has written a book, and it's called The Anxious Generation. He then goes into some shocking and frightening statistics of the impact of the smartphone on that generation, on their changes of behavior, their mental well-being. And there is no doubt there is a significant problem in the world today. Carl Jung, who is a Swiss psychiatrist, well known in the circles that do psychology over there, he says, hurry is not of the devil, it is the devil. Let's just think of that for a moment. But for most Christians, the biggest impact is upon our relationship with Jesus. What we've learned over the last few weeks of listening to the course on a Sunday and on going through it in our small groups is that there are many distractions to our intimacy and our time spent with Jesus. And lack of time is bound, of course, to have an impact and a negative impact indeed. We know that the less time we spend with Christ, the less like Christ we become. And the less fruitful we are because we're not doing what Christ has encouraged us to do and to be like him in every way. I must admit that over the years, the most wonderful people, the people that I've wanted to spend time with, are those that have spent time with Jesus. And it's obvious. They exude a sort of peace, a tranquility, a sparkle in their eyes. It's a sort of an authority of some kind, that a passion and purpose that is not earthly focus. And I have been blessed over my life to meet many people like that. That is what time with Jesus produces. In James's letter, he says, come near to God and he will come near to you. Hold on to that promise. So the elimination of hurry. Okay, this is what you've all been looking for. And I'm going to say, if you tap into Mr. Google, how do you eliminate hurry? You'll come up with some wonderful, wonderful examples. Don't ignore that. It's great. Some really good practical things, and I encourage you to do that. All agree that running too fast for too long is unsustainable. So a reaction to fast food is slow food, the stuff that you cook yourself, and then you savor each mouthful and enjoy it for longer. You take your time over all of that. Out of this has come the slow movement, okay, which again impacts all aspects of our life. All of this, as I said, is excellent and are practical ways to create a margin in your life that is really, really good. Now, the truth is that margin relates to like farmers' fields. They're being encouraged not to cram as much of the produce into whatever area they can get. They've been encouraged to create a margin around the fields so that flowers grow there, so that wildlife just increases, that insects can flourish. And the impact of that has been quite extraordinary, because whereas you thought that you were trying to get as much from that and this was the maximum way you're going to get the yield, they found actually this way, having a margin with all those things, is the best way, because it's increased pollination of the crops and is the right way to live your life. And as Christ's apprentices, he has promised us to show us a more excellent way. It says that phrase just before, in Corinthians, the wonderful chapter on love. He will show us a more excellent way. As Christ's apprentices, he has invited us to share his yoke, as we read earlier in Matthew's Gospel. So let's remind ourselves of what this yoke he talks about. It's not a common thing. We don't have too many yokes around at this moment. We have tractors. But in those days, a yoke was created specifically for animals to pull plows. And it was deliberately made to avoid those pressure points on each animal, so it fits snugly in just the right places. It was a yoke that was shared between an experienced ox and a less experienced ox. The more experienced would take most of the strain, they would dictate the pace, and they would go in a straight line, which is ensured that they were not veering to the right or to the left. And Jesus was saying, match your pace of life to my pace of life. Don't go any quicker. The yoke won't allow you to do that. So taking Jesus' yoke, whilst on the one hand seems restrictive, actually is the exact opposite and frees you to live a life full of life. Walking at the pace of Jesus is vital to our way of living. A slow, a deliberate, an intentional pace, and this is really important, mirroring Jesus' example of being mindful, compassionate, and present in every moment, prioritizing quality over speed and focusing on serving others rather than rushing through life. I think you're there with me, aren't you, now? Now, I want you to compare that to the yoke that you are wearing or might be wearing or often have worn in the past. You will be wearing one. John Mark Comer says the world influences whether you like it or not. And I'm saying you will be wearing a yoke of some kind. It's got all sorts of names. It could be a work yoke. It could be a social media yoke. It can be your family's expectations of you yoke. Or referencing Dallas Willard, it's your inadequacy, I'm not good enough, or imposter syndrome yoke. Or your fear of failure, your fear of missing out, or your fear of man yoke. Or your guilt at what you have done or what you have not done yoke. That is a far cry from the yoke that Jesus wants for us. In a letter that Paul wrote to the Galatians, he says this: it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery, which is what all those other things I was referencing early on. St. Augustine, a wonderful theologian, said this about Jesus' yoke. Jesus' yoke is like the wing of a bird. Yes, the wing weighs down the bird, but it enables the bird to fly. I think that's just so profound, so deep. So Christ's yoke brings freedom and enables us to fly. But the question is, how does it do that? Well, the thing is that Jesus models a different way of living, and this is a thing that Jesus did. Now, you could pick up the book and you can see that John Mark encourages you to 3 or 4 different things all begin with S. Okay, these aren't all going to begin with S, but I think you'll resonate with them and you'll understand them. The first is he rested and he chatted to his Father. It's about solitude. It's about prayer. Many examples in the gospel accounts. You can read through it. I'll just list loads of them. In a boat in a storm. After John Baptist's beheading, he was sad. He was sad that that happened. But it was also before the feeding of the 5,000. And he said to his disciples, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. And after the feeding of the 5,000, he went up a mountain alone to be with his Father. It also says at daybreak he went out to a solitary place. Another time Jesus withdrew to a lonely place and prayed. And lastly, Jesus, tired from a journey, sat down at the well. We would be incredibly foolish if we didn't do the same thing ourselves in our life. I need to tell you that my favorite activity, or should I say inactivity, in the summer months, and of course it is weather permitting, is sitting in our garden in a warm spot very early in the morning with a cup of tea and my Bible. My favorite activity in the summer. It's glorious. Pause, breathe, abide. Pause, breathe, abide. The second thing that Jesus modeled was he lived a simple life. The Son of Man, it says, had nowhere to lay his head or rest his head. He was content with what he had, no straining to get the next thing and the next thing before everyone else. I once spoke to an A&E consultant, and he wasn't a Christian, and he knew that I was, and he said, I want to tell you about my grandfather. My grandfather was a Welsh miner. He worked all day, but he had two things, two personal possessions only in his life. The first was a pocket watch, and the second thing was his Bible. And this is what the consultant said to me. He said, he was the most content man I have ever met in my life. Two possessions. Now, I don't want you to feel guilty, because I'll feel guilty otherwise. You can have more than two possessions. It's all right, you know. But we've got to be careful. We've got to understand that God does want us to live a life that is more simple than perhaps the one that we see around us. Remember the prophetic word that Roland, who just sent that word to us, he said about decluttering our lives. Perhaps now that's something we can put into place. The third thing, the Bible says that Jesus only did what the Father told him to do. That's remarkable, isn't it? Only did what the Father told him to do. Now, Christ has told us to do many things. He's actually told us the way we should live our lives. He's told us the way we should be going, the things we should be witnessing about, all those sorts of things, there's no doubt. And if we do that, it has a significant impact upon our lives, a positive effect on your life day to day. But we must be careful of taking on and doing too much. Now, I'm a bit hesitant, because Dave will hit me here, because he'll suddenly find that everybody will stop doing the things that they signed up to, and they'll say, well, John told us not to. John told us not to. But I want you to think about not the things that you are doing currently, but some of the things that we do that get in the way of the things that we should be doing. That's a much more important question. What things are you doing that you perhaps don't need to do that will enable you to do the things that you should be doing? Have you got that in your mind? A couple of examples for me. When my kids were growing up, we used to have a thing called an Amiga computer console, okay? That's back in the day. You can see it in museums, okay? But one of the things was a game, we called it Sizz. I don't think it was called that. But, you know, the kids played it. I'm very competitive. And I wanted to be the champion of the world. So I would spend hours on this ridiculous game. And I suddenly came to my senses. That is it. I'm going to stop. Of course, I stopped when I was champion, but I did stop. About 20 years later, Catherine found on our computer the free game of Patience. Now, we all know what Patience is. It's a simple game you play. No. This has a score attached to it. And the faster you go and solve the problem, the bigger the score is. And so what did I have to do? I wasn't going to allow Catherine to beat me on this. So I would spend ages, utterly ridiculous. Thankfully, that took less of a time to come to my senses and realize I've stopped. Don't play it anymore. Or I do occasionally, but it has no impact. And I've learned my lesson. I haven't left this as champion. Catherine still remains champion of Patience. I caught her playing it yesterday. I need to tell you that. No. I'm not saying we shouldn't play any of these things. I'm not saying many of these things are great fun. They're really enjoyable. If you enjoy that, so I enjoy walking in the hills. Others don't do that. Others enjoy reading. That's fine. But let's be aware that it takes our time. Where are your limits? Ephesians chapter 5 says this. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. And finally, it says Jesus was present with people. Last week, Ollie talked about community, what a difference community makes to us all. And it also encourages the lonely, the disengaged to be part of something and to have hope. We were made for relationship, even the most curmudgeonly, that's an old word, isn't it, miserable amongst us. Everybody is part of that. It's about breaking bread together, not the communion sort, but the real breaking to bread together with meals with one another. It adds something really special, solace, a rest, a sense of belonging, which is so important. And all the way through the Gospels, Jesus had plenty of time for people in all sorts of situations, conversation with healing, around food, around weddings, around walking in cornfields, and about weeping at gravesides. Now, it would be fair to say that whilst I haven't read the whole of John Mark's book on hurry, I have researched it. It is absolutely brilliant, and I can't do it justice in 30 minutes. But as he says in it, he is not you in your situation, and I am not you in your situation. My stage of life, my quality of life might be very different to yours. And so I am not going to preach at you as such. You need to come to God and have a chat with him. Some of you have no sense of hurry in your life. It's great. Others will have virtually no time at all, and all you're doing is operating from day to day. No moment is wasting. I don't understand all your situations. I can't possibly. But I can point you to somebody who does understand, who is gentle and lowly, or gentle and humble in heart, and whose yoke is easy and whose burden is light, and will help you to lie down in green pastures. Some will have heard me use this quote before, and it's this: people only change when the reward is great or the pain is too much. And is that where you are in your situation today? Is life working for you? Do you enjoy the intimacy with Jesus as you walk the way with him? You might not have started any of those 9 practices that the video talks about and Martin spoke about just recently, but maybe today will help you to start to realign your life to enable you to put into place those things that are encouraged to do so, and to take your apprenticeship to Jesus to another level. The reward is greater than you can possibly imagine. My encouragement is, give it a try. Give it a try. Let's just pray. I'm just not going to rush away, just going to not allow hurry to snatch away all those things that people have heard. They won't have heard it all, but the bits that God wants to speak to you about right now, just allow him to do so in the silence. We sang so easily earlier on, all I desire is you. You are all my desire. And Father, I just pray that that will be the case for us all. That will be the case, Lord, as we go out from this place, as we reflect on our lives before you. And oh God, we need you. You know us right well, the Bible says. You understand us. And you would help us, oh God, with that yoke that you not force on us, but offer us today. Help us, we pray. Amen. So I encourage you not to rush away, to talk with people, to reflect on it more. If you need prayer, there'll be a prayer team right by that new banner that we've got right at the back of the hall. It's there for you to use, enable you to grow closer to God in the doing so. and every blessing to you.